Do you think drafting a coat or a jacket pattern is too hard or daunting? Well, stop worrying because in this video, I am going to show you some easy techniques that will help you on your journey to coat making. Hi, I'm Aletha. Welcome back to my channel. And if you are just starting your sewing journey, you have come to the right place because I am pleased to show you tips and techniques to help you along the way. In today's video, we are going to learn how to draft the pattern for a collarless coat to add to our spring capsule wardrobe. In lesson 3 of this series, I showed you how to draft a two-piece sleeve pattern. We're going to need that pattern to complete our tailored coat. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, you are going to need plenty of pattern paper. So make sure you have enough on hand. And you are going to need your front and back bodice blocks. Remember, your bodice blocks are drafted from your personal measurements or that of your client, whichever one you're doing. Now, if you don't have one, I have the links in the description for you, okay? So first you're going to go ahead and measure out your paper to be about 30 inches. Now I want to point out, as you can see, my bodice block is well used. So I already have my darts cut out. It will be easier for you if you did the same. You can always tape it back to how you like it once you're done. Let's start by tracing our front bodice. Place your block in the middle of your paper, okay? We need to have some room for the adjustments, so on the front and on the back, keep some room. You can draw a reference line if you'd like, just for your center front, or you can just start tracing like I am. Start at the waistline and draw in about a ½ inch so that you'll know where the waistline starts. Next, trace the center front. Make sure to include the notch for the horizontal balance line, and then continue up to the neck and trace. Now, if your shoulder dart is open, you need to close it. Make sure that the shoulder length is correct. You want to include the shoulder notch as well. Now trace around the armhole and also include the notch. And trace the small portion of your side seam right here, okay? Next, close up the side bust dart. Trace the armhole again, but only up to the notch. Now trace down the side seam to the waist and make a mark for the waistline. Now don't remove your block just yet. Go ahead and locate your hole punch at the bust point and pencil it in. Make sure you can see it when you remove your block. Because we need to move the bust point over, take your ruler and measure over by 1/4 inch. Move it towards the armhole. I like to make another hole and then circle it. Next, square a line straight across through the bust point. Now locate the center of the neck and from the bust point, draw a line. I came in about 1.5 inches from the center front. Next, go ahead and locate the tip of your shoulder at the armhole. We are going to measure 3 inches down from there. So grab your ruler and mark on the armhole 3 inches down. From here, we are going to make another line to that new bust point. So remember, when we trace our armhole, we traced this small section of our side seam, right? And then we closed our bust dart and traced up to the notch. And that gave us this small opening here. And this is where we are going to create a new side bust dart. So draw a line from the bottom of the side seam here to that new bust point. Now we are going to slash and spread our lines. We're going to cut to, but not through, our bust point. And I like to put a piece of tape here to strengthen the paper. Now before I start slashing, I am going to trim off some of this extra paper. We don't need it. And I am going to darken my line slightly so that you can see. I'm going to use my rotary cutter. And if you do use your rotary cutter, make sure to change a blade because paper makes the blades dull, okay? Now we need more paper so we can slash and spread. My first spread is going to be on the neckline and it's going to be 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so we're going to move it away from the center front and spread it about 1/4 of an inch. Then on my armhole, I'm going to spread 3/8 of an inch. But first, I'm going to tape my paper down at the center front so that it doesn't move. 3/8 of an inch, okay? So the very first thing we want to do here is we want to come down on our neck, 1/8 of an inch. Now I want to continue my neckline around and up. So here I'm going to go up 1/8 of an inch. So over here was 1/8 of an inch at the neck. You're going to keep going 1/8 of an inch, and you're going to go 1/8 of an inch also on the shoulder and the neck point, okay? But over here where we raised our sleeve cap, we need to make this 1/4 of an inch. You also want to come out from your shoulder 1/4 of an inch. I'm making marks first because I'm going to draw everything in. All right, and we're going to follow our armhole, but we're not going to worry about all of this that we did right here. Okay, so none of this is going to matter. We're only going to concentrate on the lower armhole, and we're going to lower our armhole even more. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower the armhole 1/2 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch down, and 1/2 of an inch out. There we have it. Okay, I'm going to continue all the way around to the center front. So square off your horizontal balance line, and because we moved our armhole, the notch that we created for our horizontal balance line moved, and this is my new horizontal balance line notch right here on the orange line. Okay, that's important. Now let's go ahead and move down to the waistline. But before we draw in the waist, we want to make sure that we have our measurements for our waist, our hip. We want to make sure we have the measurement for our high hip, and those are going to be divided by 4, remember, because we're doing the front of our bodice and it's just 1/4 of our circumference. And we also want to make sure that we have our waist to our hip measurement, okay? Now from the center front line, let's go ahead and square over your waist measurement plus add 1/2 of an inch. Next, move back over to the center front line, measure down your waist to hip measurement. Mine is 8.5 inches. Now square over your hip measurement. Next, measure down from your waist 4.5 inches. And this is going to be our high hip. Now square over. Now let me show you a previous pattern that I did with a princess seam line. Now this is a traditional princess seam line that starts at the mid shoulder, but I want to show you how I moved my seam over and down to the armhole, right under the notches. So my seam ends up 2/3 of the way from the center front. That's important because I am going to do the same thing over on my new draft. I measured 2/3 of the way and made a mark on the bust, waist, high hip, and hip. Now all I have to do is draw it in. Next, I want to taper in at the waist, and it's going to be a 1/2 of an inch. That's why we added a 1/2 of an inch to our waist measurement. I want it to be even on both sides, so I'm going to measure over 1/4 of an inch on both sides of the style line. So next, take your hip ruler and connect your hip to your high hip and to your waist. Flip your ruler around and connect your waist to your side seam at the underarm. Next, let's draw our princess seam. So from the waist, taper to nothing at the high hip, and from the waist to nothing at the bust. Do both sides. Next, add the 1/2 inch on the side seam. Be sure to smooth all of your lines. For the center front, measure out 1.5 inches. So I'm adding a placket so my total measurement on my front extends out 1.5 inches. Now grab your sleeve draft that we created earlier. That's the whole sleeve. Now it is time to match the sleeve with the armholes. So locate the front of the sleeve. The front has 1 notch and the back has 2. That's how we know the difference. We need to match the center of the sleeve with the shoulder seam. And we also need to mark our notch placement. So take the sleeve draft and start exactly at the tip of the underarm and walk your sleeve along the cutting line. Make sure that you are walking on the adjusted coat line. For me, that's the orange line. Now you can use your awl or your fingers, whichever you prefer. I'm going to use the awl. Now when you get to the notch, make sure to mark the notch on the bodice. And keep walking and pivoting your sleeve until you get to the shoulder seam. The center of the sleeve and the shoulder seam should match. I'm going to show you that my center notch on my sleeve matched up perfectly when I walked it, so I don't have to do anything. If you came up with a different point, for instance, say that you walked your line and you fell a little short, say it was 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, you need to mark that, okay? Then when you do your back, because this is the front bodice, when we draft the back, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to walk our sleeve draft along and see where we come up with the back. You're going to take that and you're going to divide it in half, and that's where your notch is going to fall, okay? Next, grab some pattern paper and trace off your back bodice. Now I'm not going to show you how to trace because I think you already have the concept. You're going to trace off your back bodice. Now the back bodice is so easy because we don't have the bust, we don't have to slash and spread or manipulate anything. You're just going to trace off your back bodice. You're going to do the exact same thing as you did for the front. So for the back, center back, this is my center back, you're going to go down 1/8 of an inch. You're going to go up 1/8 of an inch, just like we did on the front. You're going to end with 1/4 of an inch. So make a 1/4 of an inch line here. Make sure it's squared. Make a 1/8 of an inch. Then you're going to do your neck. You're going to follow along 1/4 of an inch. Now here is where you need to make sure you stop and consider your back dart. Draw in or use your pinwheel for your dart. Then 1/4 of an inch, continue. Stop here. Down on your side seam, you're going to go down 1/2 of an inch and you're going to go out 1/2 of an inch. Okay? Just like we did on the front. Exactly. Okay? Then you're going to continue down. Now, the thing about it is you're going to do exactly the same thing that I did with the making sure that you have a measurement for your hip, a measurement for your high hip, a measurement for your waist. Okay, you're gonna do 1/2 of an inch for your taper for your princess seam. Now, where does your princess seam fall? This is the underarm that we did, the undersleeve. So the undersleeve, remember, we have a notch here for our side seam. So what I want you to do is match the outer side seam that we did. Place the notch there. I'm going to walk my sleeve up and around. And where I stop is where I'm going to start my princess seam for the back. You want to make a mark exactly where that stops, okay? And that's where you're going to start your princess seam, all right? And you're going to, so first, you're going to make a line. You're going to divide it in half on each side. Then you're going to draw your princess seam to nothing. So the last adjustment for the back bodice is for you to decide. This is a design choice. As you can see, I tapered in at the waist to fit my shape. I tapered in 3/8 of an inch. Now this adjustment is for added shape if you like that, especially if you have a larger bottom, wider hips, or even a sway back. The choice is yours, so you decide. You can leave it straight or you can taper it in. You have all of the pieces that you need to get started. I am going to show you how to pattern it out. Okay, everyone, before we continue, I'm going to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel. You don't want to miss any of the pieces that are going to go into our spring capsule wardrobe. I'm going to show you how to create them right here in this channel. So like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so that you can be reminded every time I do a video in this series. Okay, so I am going to draft my pattern from the inside out using the base block that I created. First, I'm going to lengthen my block to my desired hem length, and for me, that's 16 inches from the waistline. So the inside consists of interfacing, lining, padding, and the front and back facing. I extended my center front out 1.5 inches. That's for the buttons. I want my facing to be a little bit wider, so I am extending my shoulder from the neck 3 inches. And then I'm just going to mark it and draw a line down along the princess seam, and that's going to create my facing. Okay, so my next piece is going to be my lining. I measured down along my side seam 3 inches, and then I squared across. Now my lining is going to attach to my front facing, and it's going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now the lining needs to be adjusted, so I'm going to come back to that. I'm also going to need a piece right here that is my chest piece. So I'm going to draw this in now because it gives me a visual for my front facing. For this, measure down along the armhole about 6 inches. Then measure along the neck from the shoulder about 2 inches. Use a curved ruler to connect the points. Now grab more pattern paper, and for my front facing, I'm going to trace off my lines from the center front to the princess line. So here's my front facing. I've added a 1/2 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch around the neck, and a 1.5 inch hem. I've added my grain line and my center front notches. I'm going to use my front facing to draw my interfacing. My interfacing needs to be about 1/8 of an inch smaller to eliminate any bulk. Okay, so I am going to adjust my lining to add room for movement. Now I am doing a partial lining, so whether you're doing a partial lining or a full lining, the adjustments are the same. I'm going to come out 1/4 of an inch on my side seam. I'm going to add a 1/2 inch up at the underarm, and then I'm going to go up here to my shoulder and my armhole, and I'm going to come out 1/2 of an inch. Next, I want to connect my underarm to my armhole with a curved ruler, but I want to make sure that the lines taper in to meet the original armhole. Next, I want to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to leave 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on the bottom of the facing. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my original base block again, and I'm going to trace off my chest piece right here that we drew. And this is going to be very simple. Just trace it off and cut it out. The only thing is to remember, you are not going to add any seam allowances. All right, so let's trace it off and cut it out. Okay, so my chest piece is all cut out. I just want to show you that it is on a 45-degree angle. So you are going to cut your chest piece on the bias. Make sure that that's clear on your pattern. Okay, so I am going to continue with my base block, and I am going to draft 2 pieces of interfacing. One for the top part of my side front, and a piece for the armhole side of the front. So we're going to draft it as one, and then we're going to cut it into 2 pieces. I'm going to grab my curved ruler, and I'm going to place it on the reference line that I drew for my lining, and I'm going to curve it up. I'm going to draw a curved line up towards my princess seam. So this is going to be my interfacing. I'm going to split it into 2 pieces, one for my side front and the other piece for my front armhole section. Okay, so now let's move on to our back. But I want to remind you that our interfacings do not need side seams. So I just want to show you, I'm going to use the side front interfacing to measure the distance on my back side. The back side and the front side need to be the same distance along the side seam. I get a measurement of 3 inches down on my side seam, but I'm not going to draw a straight line across my back. Instead, I am going to curve up and right on my horizontal balance line. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is our back interfacing, and just like the front, we are going to size it down 1/8 of an inch smaller than our cutting line, and we are going to cut it into 2 pieces with no seam allowances. Now for the back lining, we need to adjust it so that it has room to move in the same way that we did the front lining. So we are going to go out 1/2 of an inch on the armhole at the shoulder. We are going to go out 1/4 of an inch on the side seam, and we are going to go up a half of an inch on the underarm. We are then going to taper those lines in towards the original cutting line so that it meets, just like we did on the front. Okay, so I am going to add some more paper to my center back, and I am going to extend my lining past my center back 1 3/4 of an inch. And that is going to allow me to crisscross my lining at the center, which is what we call a buggy back lining. It's just for movement because I'm not going to have a full lining. The last piece for the back is going to be our back facing. And that's very simple. You're just going to draw around the neckline, and my facing is going to be 2 inches along the shoulder and 2 inches along the center back. Next, we're going to cut out our back facing. We're going to cut out our lining, and each of these pieces is going to have the appropriate amount of seam allowance. 1/2 of an inch, and then 1/4 of an inch on our neck, and 1/4 of an inch on the bottom of our lining, just like the front. Now we are finally going to cut out our coat. You are going to cut along the princess line for the front and the back. So we're going to have a front pattern, side front pattern, back pattern, side back pattern, and sleeves. Don't forget to extend your coat to your desired hem length and add your 1 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you do a 1/2 inch seam all the way around and 1/4 of an inch on the neckline. Okay, so I have cut out my front, my back, my side front, and my side back. And now I am ready to move forward. As you can see, I have added my desired length and my 1 1/2 inch hem. Now, as you can see, I added pockets, not to my side seam, but to my princess seam. Now, this is very easy to do. All you have to do is draft a pocket that is in a comfortable position for you. So it would be at or below the waist. You would have to add all of your markings, your grain line, everything. This is very important, and this side of the pocket is going to be what we call cut on, because it is going to be part of the side front. You're going to cut it all as one. Add the seam allowance, and now the trick is to match the pocket that will be sewn on to the shape of the front pattern piece. We do that by laying our front pattern piece on top of our side front so that we can see our pocket. Make sure you can see through. Make sure you can see all of the lines. If you have to, go ahead and darken all of your lines. Now you're going to match your sewing lines. Make sure that the sewing line on the seam of the princess for the front pattern and the side front pattern matches perfectly. You're going to match your waist, your hip, your high hip, and your hem lines. Just make sure everything is lined up. The purpose is to get those sewing lines as close as possible, and the next thing you're going to do is trace off the pocket. So once everything is lined up, trace off the pocket, trace off the sewing line, and trace off the cutting line. Trace off the curve of the front pocket trace off your notches, trace off your circles, trace everything exactly as you see it. And that is how you are going to get a perfect pocket. All right. Okay, moving on to the back. I added my desired length, and I also added my 1.5 inch hem to the back. Now for the back, I am going to create a vent. I'm going to make a vent on my center back, and it is going to be 5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. So starting at my orange line, which is the bottom of my hem, okay, right here, I am going to measure up 5 inches, and then I'm going to measure out 1.5 inches. I also need to create a diagonal cutting line like this, and last I'm going to complete my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we have our sleeve. We need interfacing for our sleeve cap. So you're going to trace starting from the bicep line, trace around the sleeve cap 1/8 of an inch away from the sewing line, and you're going to need 2. We need to add a vent at the bottom of our sleeve, and then we're going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance around our sleeves. And we're going to do this both for our upper sleeve and our undersleeve. The vent is going to be 1.5 inches wide and 4.5 inches long. Leave the top corners of your sleeves open. We'll come back to that. From the tip of the front sleeve to the tip of your vent, you're going to create a guideline, draw it in with pencil or marker, and then you're going to fold up the bottom of your pattern on that line. Take a marker or a pinwheel and trace over those lines. You should be able to see them. When you unfold your pattern, you have a mirrored line. Darken in your lines 1.5 inch, and then finish your hem all the way across. Make sure it's 1.5 inch. Draw a guideline from the tip of your front sleeve, and then continue your sleeve seam line all the way around to meet that guideline, and then measure the length of the guideline. Square a line over to the seam line that is 1/2 of an inch so that it forms a tab. Do the same thing for the back sleeve. And then use these guideline measurements on your upper sleeve so that they'll match. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you learned a lot of tips and techniques that will help you on your sewing journey. So I will see you in the next video.